In this short video, we are going to look at a second example of graphing sine with transformations. This one has the reflection over the x-axis. So if you look at the little graphic up above, it's showing that this graph will go down and then up for the one cycle that we're looking at. So let's break it down. We have a b value of 3, which means our period is 2 pi over 3. And we're going to use that to find our interval. Remember, we have 4 quadrants, so we're going to take our period and divide by 4. Now we're working with fractions, so instead of working with a complex fraction, instead of dividing by 4, we can multiply by 1/4 to give us an interval of pi over 6 if we simplify that. Again, that's going to be our x scale since we are not doing any horizontal translating. And I can even mark that on my x scale. So pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6. Don't write this in yet. And 4 pi over 6. Now every single one of those fractions simplifies except for the first one. Pi over 3. 2 pi over 6 simplifies to pi over 3. 3 pi over 6 simplifies to pi over 2. And 4 pi over 6 simplifies to 2 pi over 3. And I'll label the left side also. I didn't do that on the previous example, but I think it's good to have the full thing labeled since we will be graphing multiple cycles once we get our first cycle on there. Now our amplitude is 2, even though we have the negative sign. Amplitude is always positive. The negative is just the reflection over the x-axis and changes the look of the one cycle like we looked at up above. And then we have the vertical shift of 4. We can either say 4 or up 4 with the directional word. So I'm going to start out by graphing the function. We're going to go down 2 instead of up 2, and then back to the axis, then up 2 and back down 2, using the interval to get those critical points. And then to get our actual graph, we're just going to shift all of those up 4. And then once you have your one cycle on there, you should be able to figure out your range. We're going from 2 to 6. And you can even list out your critical points. So we're at 0, 4, pi over 6, 2, pi over 3, 4, pi over 2, 6, and 2 pi over 3, 4. And I'm actually going to label those coordinates with letters like we've done previously. But I'm only going to label the one cycle and those critical points. Now if I want to graph the rest of it, again, might be helpful to put a nice horizontal line in there. It helps you then see a nice reference for just fitting the graph going backwards and forwards. All right, so you've now seen 2 examples of how to graph the sine graph using the 3 transformations that we're going to focus on this year, and you're able to now work on some practice.